Hello, and welcome to the Rock Metal Podcast. I am your host, John Harris, and on my left-hand side is my right-hand man, Gabriel.
Hey, just gave my water to my right-hand side.
Okay. That sample we just heard was Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll by Slaves to Fashion, who I've got on the show with me right now. They've got a new album called The History of Heavy Metal, which is releasing one song each month with an official release in December of 2020. Right now I'm being joined by Torfin to share some stories about the music and share more info about what Slaves to Fashion has got going on. So Torfin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You are quite welcome. I'm super excited for everybody to hear what it is you guys have got cooking, because it's very unique. And speaking of which, let's go listen back to that track, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Sex, drugs, and
Groovy, coming back from the track Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, which I believe was the track that initially hit me in the face, and something that we discussed, you and I, is how much I have a unique soft spot for glam metal.
Yeah.
Or hair metal, or whatever it is you guys want to call it out there. I don't even know anymore. But it definitely struck me. It was very well produced and very well written. And then at the time, I think you had also showed me a couple of other tracks that were written. So this is the third single, correct? It was released?
That's right. The third single. We did one like the early 70s single, and we did one classic heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal type of thing, and this is the third one. So this was the glamour metal song of the project. Correct.
And so the early 70s single is up and available if anybody wants to check it out. And also the classic heavy metal was kind of like I think the artwork is very reminiscent of Iron Maiden, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. Maiden, Priest, a little bit of dose of Motorhead, but mostly Maiden, yeah.
Yeah, very cool stuff. And I found that what you guys are doing is really channeling these genres or subgenres of heavy metal, and then obviously, as the album suggests, the history of heavy metal, taking us through how heavy metal has developed over the years. So it'll be very exciting when we start getting into Degent.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's difficult.
I bet. Now, this track, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, I guess, take us through when it came to sitting down to pen a glam metal song. Was it easy?
It was not the most difficult of the project. I'm born in 77, so I was 9-10 years old when the genre exploded over the world. So the first kind of music I listened to was like Europe and Bon Jovi. So it was my childhood. So I moved on to more heavier stuff later, but I've always been a little fan of that kind of music. It's catchy, it's fun, it's party. So I had a lot of references. So it was more like narrowing them down to what exactly is, the core of the hair metal, glam metal music, So it was like finding the right references, a bit of Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, taking the biggest bands and trying to find that composition, Don't bore us, get to the chorus, get a hook, everything. So it went down fairly easy when writing it, yeah.
Yeah, because that was going to be kind of my quip, is I absolutely love glam metal, but at the same time, I imagine lyrically it's pretty easy to write a song about girls and partying or whatever.
Yeah, that title, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, it's not coming from glam metal or hair metal. I think it's an older title, but I thought it was pretty, it painted a picture about, the scene, the LA scene in the 80s and Sunset Strip and everything. So, yeah, the lyrics wasn't that difficult, no.
Yeah, very cool. Now, I'm curious, did you write a few songs and then narrow it down to the one that you felt was the best, or did you commit entirely to, we're going to write a glam metal song?
I was only writing one song and trying to get it right the first time, yeah.
Okay, very cool. Now, something is really cool to note on this one is, speaking of that LA scene, this track was mixed by Beau Hill, who has some legendary credits. As soon as it's funny, in the email you explained who Beau Hill is. No, you don't need to explain who Beau Hill is to me. That's absolutely incredible. Now, I guess my big honking question is, take us through the process of getting Beau Hill on board to mix the track.
Yeah, that was very cool, because he's was producing a lot of those really successful bands of the genre. Actually, we've been around for a long time. We released one album in 2011, I think, and I sent the music around to people. You know how it is, the producers. Just to get contacts, and I also sent the album to Beau Hill back to them, and he actually was one of the guys that responded and said, "Wow, this is really cool, guys. If you do another album, I'd like to be mixing it." So that was really cool. So when I started this project about the history of heavy metal, I had him in mind, because of course I wouldn't let that chance pass on me. So easy. I wrote him an email explaining the project, explaining the song, the concept, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Cool." So that's it. So it was a good match, I think. Very happy about the production and the crystal clear mix that he gave us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of those, speaking of the time, I don't know if you'd consider Queensryche to be a glam metal band, but, the kind of mixes where you can walk around in it. You can hear everything clearly, which is super nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't regard them as a glam metal band, but of course there's some elements in their music that is absolutely in that direction, and their productions were always super clear, really, really, pleasurable to listen at. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, groovy. All right, now let's go and listen to the next track, Thrash of the Titans.
Thrash of the Titans, baby.
All right, come back for the track Thrash of the Titans, which is going to be our thrash metal track along the road that is the history of heavy metal. Now, this one sounds very specific to me as Metallica. Now, I'm curious, though, from your perspective, take us through Thrash of the Titans. What went into writing a thrash metal track?
Yeah, it's basically the same approach on every track here. It's a lot of research, Thrash metal was around when I started listening to music, but it was not like I'm not a thrash metal guy, so it was more like I had to really go into it, listen to all those classic thrash metal albums by, of course, you mentioned Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax, Exodus, etc. So I had to struggle a little bit more here to try to find, the core of what elements was to be there. But I think you're right. It's absolutely inspired by the mid-'80s Metallica, Master of Puppets sound, but I tried to throw in a few other elements there as well. But absolutely, Metallica, is the big thrash metal bands and the pioneers of the genre, yeah.
And something else, too, as well. For example, I just chatted with Testament, because they just came out with a new album. And, the production level on, say, Testament's latest thrash metal album versus the production level of Ride the Lightning. Two very different production styles as far as thrash metal is concerned. I'm curious, what was the decision to lead more towards, say, an old school thrash metal production style than, say, something that would come out today?
Absolutely. It has been a part of this project to try to recreate the old sounds. It's very difficult. It has a tendency to become just a little too bright and modern, even if you try to make it sound retro or old school. So we were trying to do that, absolutely. And speaking of Beau Hill, we got his, can we say, counterpart here in the thrash metal department, because Flemming Rasmussen, who was producing Metallica in the 80s, he did a mix for this one. So that was really cool, to have two, let's say, legendary producers in their own genres doing those two tracks. So I think he nailed it very good. Tried not to make it too, modern metal, because modern metal is very compressed and there's a lot of sound, and it's not. It wasn't like that in the 80s. So maybe we're something in between the newer sound and the real old school sound. I don't know what you think, but that's my opinion. Yeah.
Very cool. Now, if you dug the 2 tracks, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, and Thrash of the Titans, then you'll be super excited to know that there is a full album coming in December, but with each song being released as a single each month, called The History of Heavy Metal, and it is a tribute to the different subgenres of heavy metal. So I guess my big question then is, take us through this album. What should we expect when we pick it up? What's gone into, a little bit more of what we should maybe to come from the history of heavy metal? How far into history are we going, or how far into the future or the present are we going?
It's very difficult to write modern history because, you have to have that historical distance to things. Because what has really been going on the last 10 to 20 years is it's more difficult to really see that what was happening in the 80s. But we have some of the big subgenres included, like all the extreme metal, Black Death, doom metal are coming out on a medley next month. We're doing a grunge song inspired by Chains and Soundgarden. Controversial, of course, if it's going to be on a metal compilation like this. We're doing a progressive metal song with a lot of subgenres from the 90s included in it, so that should be interesting. We're doing a power metal song, the European power metal scene. We're doing a new metal song, and we're doing a sort of compilation track for the last 20 years. So that should be very interesting at the end. I think it's like 17 subgenres in 4 minutes on that last one. So that's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I think the very last genre represented right now is the Japanese kawaii metal, which is we're doing really good just a few years back. So a lot of cool stuff.
Okay. Now that you mentioned that, I'm actually looking that up. I've probably heard it, but immediately I'm like, who? What? Kawaii metal?
Yeah, there was a Japanese band called Baby Metal that was forefronting that genre, yeah.
Okay, they have a Wikipedia page. I'm going to have to look into this.
Yeah.
I probably have heard it. Just immediately I'm not drawing a thing to it. But cool. Yeah, something else that you mentioned too is, a couple of controversial ones. I don't know. I'd argue that Alice in Chains and Soundgarden are metal bands just because they came. This goes into the whole thing of, well, grunge just means that they were produced in Seattle in 1990. Basically, is all grunge means. There's no defining. If you listen to Alice in Chains, listen to Nirvana, you listen to, they're all very different bands. What makes them all grunge? Well, Bush came out with stuff out of the UK at that same time, and they were alternative. So it's very.
I agree. It's something about this project to trying to narrow it down to what is in the mindset of people, because there's music fans have an opinion on a category like grunge. What is it really? So it's like sort of a science project trying to make a song, and everyone would say, yeah, that's grunge from Seattle in 1991. Okay. So we'll see if we can make it.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. Well, to our listeners, anything else that you wanted to throw out there? I just wanted to thank you for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It was very interesting.